Alright, so let's dive into something a little unsettling but absolutely crucial. In today's digital world, it's like detective work, but for hackers, you probably already know you leave digital breadcrumbs everywhere you go online. But this deep dive flips the script. We're gonna look at those breadcrumbs from the perspective of someone looking to exploit them.
Yeah, it's amazing how much information is out there just waiting to be pieced together, and I bet you'd be surprised how easily seemingly harmless bits of data can paint a detailed picture of someone's life, habits, and even vulnerabilities.
Okay, so let's define footprinting for our listeners. It's more than just snooping around social media, right? What are we really talking about here?
You're right, it's much more systematic than casual snooping.
Okay.
Footprinting is all about deliberately gathering information about a target to identify potential weaknesses for an attack. This target could be an individual, a whole company, even an entire network. Think of it as building a blueprint for mischief.
So, casing a joint before a heist.
That's a great analogy. The more a hacker knows, the more effectively they can target their attack.
And
that's where things get really dangerous.
our source document breaks down footprinting into two main types, active and passive. Let's start with the more aggressive one, active footprinting.
Active footprinting is like knocking on the front door to see who answers.
Okay.
It involves directly interacting with the target systems, scanning for open ports, testing security measures, even attempting to gain unauthorized access. It's risky because it can trigger alarms, but sometimes hackers are willing to take that risk for a big enough payoff.
So what does this look like in the real world? Can you give an example?
Imagine a hacker wants to break into a company's network. They might use a port scanner, which is a tool that probes a system for open doors. Metaphorically speaking, each open port represents a potential vulnerability that the hacker could exploit to gain access.
Okay, so that's active footprint.
This all sounds a bit unsettling. What kind of information are we talking about specifically? Our source document mentions domain names, IP addresses, phone numbers, even email addresses. Is this really that valuable to a hacker?
It is, and here's why. Think of it like this. Each piece of data is like a puzzle piece on its own. It might not seem like much, but when you start putting those pieces together, you can build a surprisingly detailed picture of someone's life, their habits, even their vulnerabilities.
Can you give us an example?
Let's say you post about going on vacation.
Okay.
That tells a hacker your house will be empty. Then they find your email address through a public forum and use it to try and reset your passwords for other accounts.
Right?
Maybe they even find your IP address from a comment you left on a blog and use that to try and pinpoint your physical location.
Wow, that's a scary thought. And I'm guessing this information isn't just used for petty theft. Our source document lists some pretty serious threats associated with footprinting, starting with social engineering. This one hits close to home for most people because it exploits our natural tendencies to be helpful and trusting.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Social engineering preys on our human nature. It's not about brute force hacking, it's about manipulation and deception. And the thing is, it can be incredibly effective.
Our source gives the example of shoulder surfing, which sounds almost too simple to be true. Can you explain that a bit more for our listener?
Shoulder surfing is as straightforward as it sounds. It's someone literally peeking over your shoulder to try and steal your password, PIN number, or other sensitive information. Think about it. You're at a coffee shop entering your credit card info online. Someone could be watching without you even realizing it.
It's scary how something so low-tech can still be effective in this digital age. Our source mentions another surprisingly analog tactic. Dumpster diving.
This one is a classic.
Yeah.
Before shredders were common, dumpster diving was a goldmine for criminals. That's exactly what it sounds like, rummaging through trash to find discarded documents with sensitive information. You'd be amazed what people throw away without a second thought.
And those discarded documents can be used to build a profile for more sophisticated attacks, right?
Exactly right. It all comes back to gathering information. Every little detail can be a piece of the puzzle.
Okay, social engineering and dumpster diving are just the beginning. What exactly does that mean for someone who isn't a tech expert? Diving aside, our source document also talks about more technical threats like system and network vulnerabilities.
Anything that compromises security. A misconfigured firewall. It could be outdated software. There are weaknesses that hackers can exploit to gain unauthorized access. Think of system vulnerabilities like cracks in a building's foundation.
So are we talking about individual devices or entire networks?
Both, actually. A single vulnerable device can be a gateway to an entire network.
Right?
Imagine an employee using an old laptop with outdated security software.
Okay.
A hacker could easily exploit that weakness to gain access to the company's entire system.
And then there's information leakage, which sounds a bit like someone leaving confidential files out in the open.
That's a great analogy. Information leakage happens when sensitive data is accidentally
Exposed, right?
or an employee accidentally emailing confidential information to the wrong person. It could be as simple as a misconfigured server that makes internal documents accessible to the public.
Those both sound like rookie mistakes, though. Do hackers really rely on these kinds of slip-ups?
You'd be surprised how often it happens.
Yeah.
Human error is one of the biggest security risks, and even small leaks can have huge consequences, especially when it comes to privacy. It's the ultimate nightmare scenario, having your identity stolen or your personal information exposed for the world to see.
Speaking of privacy, that's another major threat listed in our source.
Exactly. And with footprinting, hackers can gather enough information to create a very convincing impersonation of someone.
Using
Their personal details to open accounts, access finances, or even commit crimes in their name.
Now for the threat that feels ripped from the headlines, corporate espionage. Our source talks about hackers using footprint to steal trade secrets, sabotage competitors, even manipulate markets.
It sounds like something out of a spy movie, but it's happening in the real world, right?
Absolutely. Corporate espionage is a serious issue, especially in industries where intellectual property and trade secrets are key assets.
Right?
Imagine a company spends years developing a groundbreaking new technology only to have it stolen by a competitor through cyber espionage. The impact can be devastating.
So, what would that look like in terms of footprinting? What kind of information are these corporate spies after?
It could be anything from internal emails and financial documents to proprietary code and product designs. Hackers will try to find any information that gives them a competitive edge or weakens their target. They might even use footprinting to identify disgruntled employees who could be bribed or coerced into providing sensitive information.
It sounds like the stakes are incredibly high in this game. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the how. Okay.
Our source document lists various methodologies hackers use for footprint, starting with something we all use: search engines.
Right? I mean, we all rely on Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo. What makes them so useful for hackers?
Search engines are a goldmine of information.
Right?
Think about all the data that's publicly available online. Company websites, employee profiles, social media posts, news articles, blog entries, forum discussions. It's all indexed and searchable, making it incredibly easy for a skilled hacker to find what they're looking for.
So it's not just about typing in someone's name and seeing what pops up. It's about knowing how to use advanced search operators and techniques to really dig deep.
Exactly.
Okay.
Hackers will use specialized search operators to refine their searches and uncover hidden information. They might also use tools that scrape data from websites and social media platforms to create comprehensive profiles of their targets. Speaking of social media, that's another methodology listed in our source. We've already touched on how much we reveal about ourselves online, but how exactly do hackers exploit social media for footprinting?
Social media is a treasure trove of personal information. People post about their jobs, their families, their hobbies, their travel plans. They share photos, videos, and even their location data. All of this can be valuable to a hacker trying to build a profile of their target.
It's not just about what we post ourselves, though, right? It's also about what our friends and family post about us.
Absolutely. A hacker might use social media to map out someone's entire social network, identifying their closest contacts and potential points of influence. This information can be used for social engineering attacks, phishing scams, or even blackmail attempts.
Okay. What exactly does that encompass? Moving on from the more familiar territory of social media, our source also lists web services as a footprinting methodology.
These platforms often require users to provide personal information which can be valuable to a hacker. Even dating apps, online shopping sites, forums, professional networks, job boards. Think about all the services you use on a daily basis. Web services is a broad category that includes all sorts of online platforms and applications.
So even signing up for a free trial or creating a profile on a seemingly harmless website could potentially expose us to risk.
It's always important to be mindful of the information you share online.
Right?
And to carefully review the privacy policies of any website or service before you provide your personal details.
Now we're getting into some more technical territory, DNS and WHOIS. These sound a bit intimidating, but they're essential components of the internet, right?
They are.
Okay.
DNS stands for Domain Name System. It's basically the phone book of the internet, translating human-readable domain names like google.com into the numerical IP addresses that computers use to communicate. DNS footprinting involves querying these DNS servers to gather information about a target's network infrastructure like their mail servers, web servers, and other critical systems.
So a hacker could use DNS footprinting to map out a company's entire online presence.
Exactly. They can identify all the systems connected to a particular domain, which helps them plan their attack more effectively.
And what about WHOIS?
WHOIS is a directory service that provides information about who owns a domain name and how to contact them.
Right.
It can reveal the registrant's name, address, phone number, and even the date the domain was registered. This information can be valuable for identifying the individuals responsible for a website or for launching social engineering attacks.
Social engineering again, so it's not just about technical hacking, it's about using human psychology to manipulate people into revealing information.
Exactly. Social engineering is a powerful tool for hackers because it exploits our natural tendencies to trust and be helpful.
Right?
It's often easier to trick someone into giving you information than it is to hack into a system directly.
Our source document gives an example of how social engineering can be used for footprinting. Can you walk us through a typical scenario?
Imagine a hacker wants to gain access to a company's network. They might start by doing some passive footprinting using social media and other online sources to identify employees and gather their contact information. Then they might call the company posing as an IT support technician and use social engineering tactics to trick an employee into revealing their login credentials or other sensitive data.
So it's all about creating a believable scenario and then using psychology to exploit people's trust.
Exactly, and it can be incredibly effective.
People are often too willing to help, especially when they think they're talking to someone in a position of authority. All right, let's talk about the tools of the trade.
It sounds like a hacker's toolkit straight out of a movie. The Harvester, Recon, Tego, Shodan. Our source document lists a bunch of different footprinting tools, and some of these names are wild.
It can feel that way.
Anyone can download and use them, which is both fascinating and a little concerning. Yeah, but these tools are readily available online.
Can you give us a quick breakdown of what some of these tools do?
It's a powerful tool for passive footprinting, allowing hackers to quickly build a list of potential targets. It scours public sources like search engines and social media to harvest email addresses, usernames, host names, and IP addresses associated with a target. The Harvester, as the name suggests, is all about gathering information.
And what about Recon? That sounds intense.
Recon is a web reconnaissance framework.
Okay.
It can be used to discover hidden directories, identify vulnerabilities, and even map out a target's entire network infrastructure. It's like a Swiss Army knife for hackers, providing a suite of tools for gathering information about websites and web applications.
These tools sound incredibly powerful. It's been unnerving to think about how easily accessible they are.
It is. That's why it's so important to be aware of the threats and to take steps to protect yourself.
Speaking of protection, all this talk about footprinting is making me think about my own digital trail. What kind of information am I leaving behind without even realizing it?
You're not alone in thinking that. It's something we should all be more mindful of. Every comment, every website we visit contributes to our digital footprint.
So how do we even begin to minimize that footprint?
Awareness is the first step.
Right?
Once you understand how footprinting works and the types of information hackers are after, you can start taking steps to protect yourself.
What kind of steps are we talking about? Give us some practical advice.
Think about what you share online. Do you really need to post your home address or phone number publicly? Maybe not. Be mindful of the photos and videos you share, especially if they contain location data or other sensitive information.
It sounds like we need to be a lot more cautious about what we post and share. What else can we do?
Be wary of phishing scams. Hackers often use information gathered through footprinting to craft convincing phishing emails or messages. They might impersonate a trusted organization or individual to trick you into revealing personal information or clicking on malicious links. So always double-check the sender's address and be suspicious of any unsolicited requests for personal information.
So it's not just about what we share ourselves, it's also about being vigilant about potential scams and attacks.
Exactly. A healthy dose of skepticism can go a long way in protecting yourself online.
What about passwords? We hear all the time about the importance of strong passwords, but how does that tie into footprinting?
Strong passwords are crucial. Hackers can use information gathered through footprinting to guess your passwords or even crack them using brute force methods. Make sure you use unique passwords for all your accounts and enable two-factor authentication whenever possible.
Two-factor authentication. That's where you need to enter a code from your phone or email in addition to your password, right?
Exactly. It adds an extra layer of security, making it much harder for hackers to access your accounts even if they have your password.
That's a great tip. Anything else we should keep in mind?
Be careful about the information you share on public Wi-Fi networks. These networks are often unsecured, making it easy for hackers to intercept your data. If you must use public Wi-Fi, consider using a virtual private network or VPN.
A VPN creates a secure tunnel for your internet traffic, right? Making it harder for hackers to snoop on your activity.
That's right, it's like putting your data in a secure envelope before sending it over the internet.
Our source document focuses on the darker side of footprinting, but it's hard not to wonder, can these techniques be used for good as well?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, they can.
Okay.
Think about security researchers.
Okay.
They use footprinting techniques to identify vulnerabilities in systems and networks so they can be patched before malicious actors can exploit them.
So it's like a white hat hacker using their skills to protect us from the black hat hackers.
Exactly. They're using the same techniques, but with a different goal in mind.
Our source doesn't really delve into the legality of all this. Where is the line between ethical information gathering and illegal activity?
That's a complex issue, and it often depends on the context and the intent behind the information gathering.
Accessing
someone's personal information without their consent or using that information for malicious purposes is generally illegal. However, there are exceptions for law enforcement and national security agencies.
It sounds like there's a lot of gray area when it comes to footprinting.
There is, and it's important to be aware of the ethical and legal implications of these techniques. Just because information is publicly available doesn't mean it's ethical or legal to collect and use it without proper authorization.
This has been a fascinating deep dive, a little unsettling at times, but ultimately empowering. Knowing what's out there and how it works is the first step to protecting ourselves.
I completely agree, and it's an ongoing process. As technology evolves, so do the techniques used for footprinting. It's crucial to stay informed and adapt our security practices accordingly.
Any parting advice for our listeners?
Stay curious and stay vigilant.
Okay.
The more you understand about the digital world and the risks involved, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself. Don't be afraid to ask questions, research security best practices, and keep your software and devices up to date.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of footprinting. For our listeners who want to explore further, we'll be sharing some helpful resources in the show notes. And remember, a little awareness goes a long way.